resulted from a virus is a special layer of the human placenta that prevents a fetus from being rejected by the mother's body. The genes that create this tissue are called syncytins, and they were not originally found in human ancestors.
They were acquired at a couple different points in our history, about 25 and 40 million years ago. They're important for the connection between the mother and the fetus.
Some scientists now believe that viral genes like this were as important for human evolution as natural selection.
I think that horizontal gene transfer being carried out by viruses or phages was probably the primary mechanism whereby changes in species and major changes within a species occurred.
Was it by pure chance that viruses helped to create a species as sophisticated as humans? Or might this viral evolution have been intelligently directed by beings from outer space?
Anthropologists are telling us that humans evolved over time out of Africa, and then we had certain genetic leaps where we were suddenly smarter, our communication skills became greater. And so these genetic leaps throughout evolutionary history might have just been a natural thing, but they could have been engineered as well.
There is no doubt in my mind that viruses that have originated from space somehow had to do with our development here on Earth. However, it is very clear that the ancient astronaut theory proposes that the one reason why we became humans as we are today is not due to an accident by some natural virus from outer space, but a deliberate artificial change of our DNA. Could humans be the subject of a bioengineering project by extraterrestrials who use viruses from space to alter our evolution? And if so, could those viruses have been delivered to Earth in comets? Ancient astronaut theorists point to a curious event in our evolutionary history, the moment humans almost went extinct.
Around 75,000 years ago, there was a bottleneck in human evolution. It suggested that the human population actually went down from millions down to just a few thousand. This is certainly something that genetics backs up, and we have to ask ourselves what was going on at this time.
Originally, geologists believe that bottleneck of humanity was caused by the supervolcano in Sumatra exploding. Now, recent finds have indicated that's not the case, and we're leaning more towards a virus that is genetically coded for humans. Right now.
100%
there's a strange connection between these two outbreaks. They begin on the same day.
One of the things that's not often discussed is that the Great Flu epidemic began on the same day in two different places, in Boston and on the other side of the world, in Bombay. Now, those are two spots on the earth that are virtually on opposite ends, and you have to wonder how that is possible, because you can't travel within a day by ship from Boston to India, and air travel at the time didn't exist.
How does an outbreak occur of the same virus on places so spread apart in 1918 in less than 24 hours? The answer is that the virus probably fell from space.
Perhaps the Earth was grazed by the tail of a comet. And so that's why we had the outbreak of the epidemic on two sides of the planet.
Until recently, it was believed that radiation, extreme temperatures, and the vacuum of space, that is to say, the absence of any oxygen, would kill any life form. But ever since humans first ventured into space, scientists have been finding evidence to the contrary. April 20th, 1967. NASA's unmanned Surveyor 3 lander touches down on the moon and begins its mission collecting soil from the lunar surface. 2 years later, astronauts on the Apollo 12 mission recovered parts of Surveyor 3 and returned them to Earth. To the astonishment of scientists, living strep bacteria is found on the probe. But this is only the first of many cases of microorganisms surviving space travel.
There have been experiments in which microorganisms have been flown to the International Space Station and exposed to the hard vacuum and the radiation and the temperature changes of deep space. And many of those organisms survive.
Incredibly, several types of bacteria have thrived back on Earth after spending up to 2 years outside the International Space Station. But even more surprisingly, this durability isn't reserved for single-celled organisms alone. In September 2007, a Russian Soyuz rocket carried tiny animals called tardigrades into space to test their legendary ability to thrive in extreme environments.
Tardigrades are called water bears. They're found in the polar regions on fossils and so forth. And they're beautiful little animals. They have a very unusual life history. And there were experiments in which tardigrades were carried to the International Space Station, and they were found to survive exposure to the deep space environment. And after they were brought back, there were several of the tardigrades that were still alive.
Now, in the last 20 years, it was shown beyond any doubt that microbes are essentially born space travelers. They can survive almost any of the rigors that you can think of that would greet them in space. High temperatures, high radiation, intense cooling, and even intense heating.
It's also well established that microorganisms can very easily survive in bodies like comets and could well live in bodies like Europa and Enceladus because there is ice there, there's liquid water oceans underneath the icy crust.
In recent years, astronomers are identifying more and more planets that could potentially harbor life. Some believe that microbial life first evolved on one of these distant planets. Eons later, meteor impacts blasted some of them into space, where they took root in comets. But even if true, how could they descend to Earth and infect humans?
We know for a fact that material from other bodies in our solar system is continually raining down on the surface of the planet
it could well be bringing with it dead and possibly even living microorganisms as it enters the Earth's atmosphere and then lands in oceans or lakes or streams of the planet.
Could this explain many of the plagues that sickened and killed millions throughout history? In 2007, an international team of researchers set up a research facility in the Sierra Nevada mountains of Spain to collect data on microbes falling to Earth from the sky. What they discovered remains controversial.
The total amount of viruses that were falling down on the Earth was something like 800 million individual viruses per square meter of the Earth. The conclusion they came to, of course, was that this was essentially viruses that were lofted from the surface of the Earth, taken up to the clouds, and brought back. Now, I think some would have been recirculated in this way, but not all. And I feel that this is one of the most striking examples of science being essentially dishonest in its conclusions. These 800 million viruses per square meter falling on the Earth must include viruses that are coming from outside.
Although some scientists believe that life on Earth actually originated with microbes that rained down from comets, a theory known as panspermia, an even more controversial theory called directed panspermia, proposes that these comets were sent here not by accident, but deliberately.
If I'm an alien species and I want to start a colony on a different planet, think of what we're doing now. We want to send human beings back to the moon. We want to send human beings to Mars. What if that's not what they did? What if the ancient aliens didn't send complete life forms, but sent submicroscopic life forms?
Mainstream scientists remain skeptical that microbes can survive for thousands of years inside icy comets, much less that they might be sent to Earth deliberately to alter human evolution. But others argue that the proof can be found right here on Earth, in the closest environment we have to comets, the icy depths of glaciers. Whistler, Canada, April 17th, 2019. Ancient astronaut theorist Giorgio Tsoukalos and retired NASA scientist Dr. Richard Hoover are about to board a helicopter bound for a massive ice cave in the Canadian wilderness.
All right, you ready for this?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Dr. Hoover spent most of his career studying fossils for signs of extraterrestrial microscopic life and is a leading proponent of panspermia, the idea that life on Earth originally rained down from comets in outer space. He has invited Giorgio to accompany him while he investigates the Whistler Ice Cave,
I always love this.
where he is confident they will find the glacial ice teeming with microbial and perhaps even more sophisticated life forms. Life forms that may be thousands of years old.
Well, this is just absolutely magnificent. It really is.
If alien viruses are reaching Earth, Dr. Hoover suggests that those that don't find a host could survive within such an environment for long periods of time. Today, he'll examine the glacier for the perfect samples to analyze in his laboratory.
So, Richard, how excited are you to be here to conduct this experiment? Well, I'm tremendously excited. Absolutely a marvelous opportunity to report studies of life in Earth.
After a 20-minute helicopter ride, the team arrives at the Whistler Ice
So, in fact, there are some microorganisms that only reproduce once every half a century or once a century.
So the microbes that are found in here, are they in suspend animation or are they moving around?
All of the above.
So essentially what you're saying is that this entire cave is filled with life.
Yes, but not just that. This entire ice cap is filled with life. There is this enormous amount of microorganisms that live and thrive and love to live in these low temperatures of the ice cave that we have here, and ice caves and icy glaciers all over the planet Earth, and probably all over icy regions within our entire solar system, and maybe widely distributed throughout the entire universe.
Are we essentially inside the interior of a comet? Is this what it looks like?
Yes, microorganisms can live in ice, and ice is a dominant component of comets. Organisms can remain alive and protected by the icy material of the comet until it arrives into another solar system and blows off chunks of material that can find a planet that it can consider a wonderful home.
And so this basically ties into the whole idea of panspermia.
Water is a wonderful radiation shield. And when you have a comet that is a few miles in diameter, on the inside of that cometary crust there is all of this magnificent ice that has been frozen and then reworked with material going in and out. So comets are not just a magnificent place for panspermia. I am convinced that comets are an absolutely wonderful place for the origin of life.
Incredibly, Giorgio and Dr. Hoover discovered that the glacier isn't home to just microscopic life.
This is magnificent. Look, these ice worms. This one has just crawled out of the glacier. Wow, he's deep in the ice. Look at this. Over here, 2 more ice worms. They're all in here compared to the ice.
Clearly looking for something.
Yeah, he's hunting.
We discovered life in the most inhospitable of environments.
Amazingly, Dr. Hoover has found some of the rarest animals on Earth. Iceworms only exist in a handful of locations in North America. But how can animals live and thrive in frozen blocks of ice?
So how do these ice worms come about?
This is an incredible evolutionary phenomenon. They have apparently evolved to be able to live and grow and feed and reproduce inside of glacial ice and snow. They are feeding on algae, cyanobacteria, and other bacteria that live in the ice, and they can make burrows through the ice, just like an earthworm makes burrows through the soil. And we may see similar kinds of organisms on the polar cap of Mars, or perhaps even in craters of the moon, or perhaps the icy moons of our solar system like Europa and Enceladus.
You know, it's kind of incredible because we came here in the hopes of finding microbial life, and here we are looking at ice worms, which are actual animals. So this is more than what we hoped for.
It is incredible.
As Giorgio and Dr. Hoover take their samples to a lab to be analyzed, what kind of life forms might they find within the Pemberton Glacier? Could it support the theory that life on comets is more common than we ever thought possible? And if so, is it just the random byproduct of a universe that is teeming with various forms of life? Or is it part of a more strategic plan? A plan deliberately designed to alter human evolution. Ancient astronaut theorist Giorgio Tsoukalos and retired NASA scientist Dr. Richard Hoover have just collected deep ice core samples from the Pemberton Glacier in Whistler, Canada.
First sample that we got.
Now back in the lab, they are hoping to observe microorganisms that remain dormant within the glacial ice and are just now returning to life for the first time in thousands of years.
See anything?
Oh, yes, we've got bacteria.
This is fantastic. I mean, look at this one spinning right here. Yeah, this one just moves straight across the screen.
And this one is tumbling. And notice there's a cell that has just undergone cell division. Here's another one that's just undergone cell division.
Okay. The quest for extraterrestrial life, to me, has been a lifelong one, as it has been with
life exists on the planet Earth and nowhere else in the universe. If that were to turn out to be what really is the case, then we would be completely unique and we would be different from everywhere else in the universe, and that would be an amazing discovery. Much more amazing than finding out that bacteria or ice worms are crawling around on the surface of Europa today.
This is incredibly fascinating, you know, and it's also refreshing to hear an actual NASA scientist telling me these things.
If, as Dr. Hoover's research indicates, icy comets are ideal incubators for extraterrestrial life, and if microorganisms are incredibly common in the universe, is the Earth being regularly bombarded by tiny alien life forms? Life forms that could not only grow and mutate, but could also pose a deadly threat to mankind. Sussex, England, 1992.